there is a name that almost everyone on Earth has heard at least once. A name whispered in childhood bedrooms, printed on Halloween costumes, etched into the opening titles of 100 films. Transylvania. Say it aloud, and the mind fills with fog, with castles, with the pale face of a count who never existed. For more than a century, this region has carried the weight of a fiction, so powerful it replaced reality entirely. A novel written in London by a man who never once set foot here, invented a monster, and in doing so, buried one of the most remarkable places in all of Europe beneath a myth. But what if the real Transylvania is stranger than the fiction? What if, behind the costume and the cliché, there exists a land where 6,000 brown bears still roam forests older than most nations? Where an edict of religious freedom was issued 2 centuries before the French Revolution? Where 800 years of Saxon civilization left 300 fortified churches across the hills and then vanished almost overnight? Where a British king found a landscape so unchanged, so quietly radical, that he returned every year for a quarter of a century? This is not the Transylvania of horror films. This is the Transylvania the world forgot to look for. The Carpathian Mountains curve across Eastern Europe like a drawn bow. Nearly 900 miles of limestone and granite, older than the Alps, wilder than the Pyrenees. And at the center of that arc, cradled inside the bend, lies Transylvania. A high plateau surrounded on nearly every side by mountains. The name itself comes from the Latin Trans-Silvam, meaning beyond the forest. Even the Romans understood. To reach this place, you had to cross something. You had to push through. The southern Carpathians rise like a wall. Locals call them the Transylvanian Alps, and the comparison is not casual. The Făgăraș Range alone contains 8 peaks exceeding 2,500 meters, including Moldoveanu, Romania's highest point, standing at 2,544 meters above sea level. These are not gentle mountains. They are sharp, exposed, laced with snow well into summer, and crossed by only 2 roads, both of which close entirely when winter takes hold. One of those roads is the Transfăgărașan, 90 kilometers of asphalt that rises in relentless switchbacks to over 2,000 meters, through 5 tunnels and past 27 viaducts, before descending again into the valley beyond. It was not built for tourists. It was built by a dictator. Nicolae Ceausescu ordered its construction in the early 1970s, reportedly after the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia, as a military route through the mountains in case of attack. More than 40 soldiers died building it. The road took 4 years to complete. Entire mountainsides were blasted open with dynamite. Today, it draws motorcyclists and filmmakers from across the world. A British television program once called it the best road on the planet. But even now, the Transfăgărașan remains open only 5 months of the year. The mountains decide when you may pass. Further west, the Retezat Massif holds something older and quieter. Established in 1935, Retezat National Park stretches across 380 square kilometers of alpine wilderness. 80 glacial lakes sit among its peaks, carved by ice sheets that retreated long before any written record. 1,190 plant species grow here. The park was declared a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve in 1979, and large portions of it remain without trails, without shelters, without any human mark at all. Between these mountain walls, the Transylvanian plateau opens, a gently rolling interior of farmland and river valleys sitting at 300 to 500 meters above sea level. Nearly 27,000 square kilometers of grassland, forest, and villages that from the air look almost unchanged from the way they appeared 2 centuries ago. 3 great rivers drain this plateau: the Olt, the Mureș, and the Someș, carving valleys 100 to 200 meters deep into the rolling terrain. The Olt, at 615 kilometers, is the longest river flowing entirely within Romania's borders. These rivers were the highways of antiquity, carrying salt, timber, and trade between mountain communities and the lowlands beyond. The villages along their banks still follow the water's logic, clustered at fords, at junctions, at the places where the valley widens enough to permit a church, a square, a life. But it is beneath the canopy where Transylvania holds its most urgent secret. Romania contains the largest area of primary and virgin forest in the European Union outside Scandinavia. The estimates vary. Some say over 500,000 hectares. Others place it lower. What is agreed upon is that roughly 2/3 of all remaining primeval forest in the entire European Union stands here in the Romanian Carpathians. These are not managed woodlands, not planted rows of timber waiting for harvest. These are forests that have never been cut. Beech, fir, and spruce growing in the same cycles they have followed since the last ice age. Trees that were old when the Ottoman Empire was young. Canopies so dense, the forest floor receives almost no direct light. 9 component areas within Romania's Carpathians have been inscribed by UNESCO as part of the ancient and primeval beech forests of the Carpathians, covering some 24,000 hectares. In the Semenic National Park, a single unbroken stretch of virgin beech forest extends for over 4,200 hectares. It is the largest of its kind in Europe. Beneath the mountains themselves, the darkness continues. Romania holds more than 12,000 limestone caverns. Many have never been fully explored. In the Apuseni Mountains, at an altitude of over 1,100 meters, lies the Sighisoara Ice Cave. Inside, in permanent darkness, sits the world's largest compact underground glacier. 75,000 cubic meters of ice, more than 20 meters thick in places. The oldest layers at the base are estimated at 10,000 years old. The cave was first documented in 1863, but the ice has been forming and reforming long before any human record. The temperature inside never rises above 0. Deeper into the western mountains, another cave tells an older story still. Peștera Urșilor, the Bear's Cave, was discovered by accident in September of 1975, when a quarry blast cracked open a sealed chamber. Inside lay 140 skeletons of cave bears, Ursus spelius, creatures that went extinct more than 20,000 years ago. The bones date to between 40,000 and 45,000 years before the present. The bears had died here, sealed in stone, and waited in silence ever since. But in Transylvania, the bears are not only fossils. Romania is home to Europe's largest brown bear population outside Russia. More than 40% of all brown bears in the European Union live within these mountains. The exact number is contested. Traditional counting methods suggested 6,000 to 8,000. A 2025 genetic study analyzing more than 24,000 DNA samples placed the figure as high as 12,000. Males can reach 350 kilograms. The largest specimen ever recorded in Romania weighed 480. To put the scale in perspective, France has roughly 70 brown bears, Italy about 100, Spain 350. Romania has thousands. The Carpathian ecosystem is only slightly larger than the Greater Yellowstone area in the United States, yet supports roughly 10 times as many bears. Around Brashov, a city of 250,000 people, bears regularly walk through traffic, cross parking lots, rummage through dumpsters. They are not visitors to this landscape. The landscape is theirs. The bears do not walk alone. Romania's wolf population is estimated between 2,300 and 4,000 individuals, roughly 30% of all wolves in the European Union, excluding Russia. In the late 1960s, under communist-era bounties, only 1,500 survived. It was the remoteness of the virgin forests that saved them. Today, packs of 2 to 7 animals hold territories of 50 to 100 square miles, feeding primarily on wild boar. They are rarely seen, but they are always present. Alongside the wolves, roughly 2,000 Eurasian lynx move through the Carpathians, one of the largest populations in Europe. Taken together, Romania holds approximately 40% of the European Union's entire population of all three. Large carnivore species, bears, wolves, lynx, sharing the same forest. Nowhere else on the continent does this still exist. And then there is the animal that returned. The European bison, the largest land mammal on the continent, disappeared from Romania more than 200 years ago. Across Europe, the story was worse. The last wild European bison was shot in 1927. Fewer than 60 survived, all in zoos. In May of 2014, a reintroduction program began in the Tsaku Mountains of the southern Carpathians. Over the next 7 years, 105 bison were transported from reserves across Europe and released into the wild, the largest bison reintroduction effort ever attempted on the continent. The first wild bison to walk these mountains in at least 250 years. Today, the herd exceeds 200 individuals. More than half were born in the wild. In the autumn of 2023, the bison did something no one planned. They migrated on their own, crossing into the Domogled-Cerna Valley National Park, choosing their own range. A study from Yale University found that just 170 of these rewilded bison capture an additional 54,000 tons of carbon each year, the equivalent of removing up to 84,000 cars from the road. The bison are not a symbol, they are a force. But perhaps the most quietly astonishing thing about Transylvania is not its mountains, or its predators, or its caves. It is its grass. The hay meadows of Transylvania are among the most biodiverse grasslands in all of Europe. In some areas, up to 50 different species of grass and wildflower grow within a single square yard. More than 200 species of butterfly inhabit Romania, compared to just 40 in the United Kingdom, a comparison the British King himself has often cited. At one estate in southern Transylvania, 1,200 higher plant species have been recorded in a single corner of the region. These meadows survived not by design, but by poverty. No chemical sprays, no artificial fertilizers. They were, as one researcher noted, too expensive and distrusted by these poor, small-scale farmers. The hand scything, the horse-drawn carts, the narrow strips of land inherited by each generation, all of it preserved what industrial agriculture destroyed across Western Europe decades ago. The meadows are not a relic. They are a functioning ecosystem that the rest of the continent can never rebuild. To understand how Transylvania became what it is, you must go back to the beginning. Long before the Romans came, a people called the Dacians built a civilization in these mountains. They were Thracian in origin, fierce, sophisticated, and stubbornly independent. Under their greatest king, Burebista, in the 1st century before Christ, the Dacian realm stretched from the Black Sea to the Tisza River. He was a contemporary of Julius Caesar, and Rome watched him carefully. Their capital sat high in the Orostia Mountains. Sighisoara Regia, a complex of stone fortresses, sanctuaries, and workshops spread across a mountain saddle at over 1,200 meters altitude. The site blended military engineering with sacred geometry. Circular sanctuaries aligned with celestial patterns. Defensive walls followed the natural ridgeline. It was a seat of power, of priesthood, and of something the Romans found difficult to ignore. In the early 2nd century, Emperor Trajan launched 2 wars against Dacia, the first in 101, the second in 105. The campaigns were brutal on both sides. The Dacian king, Decebalus, fought with a skill and defiance that surprised Rome. But in 106, Sighisoara fell. Decebalus, rather than submit to capture, drew his blade across his own throat. Trajan's column in Rome, 30 meters of spiraling carved relief, records both wars. Notably, it depicts the Dacians not as savages, but as worthy adversaries. Rome built a new capital nearby, Ulpia Traiana Sighisoara, and the province underwent rapid colonization. Settlers arrived from across the empire, Latin took root, and at a site called Rochia Montana in the western mountains, the Romans created what may have been the most extensive underground gold mining complex in the ancient world. More than 7 kilometers of ancient workings have been mapped. An estimated 500 tons of gold were extracted over the life of the province. 25 wax writing tablets found at the site, dated between 131 and 167, are among the oldest commercial documents in Europe. Contracts, financial records, the mundane mechanics of empire, preserved in wax beneath a Transylvanian mountain. The Latin spoken by colonists and Dacians did not vanish when Rome withdrew in 271. It evolved. Slowly, across centuries, it became Romanian, making modern Romania a Latin island surrounded by Slavic neighbors, a linguistic anomaly that persists to this day. At the site of the old Roman garrison of Apulum, a city now called Alba Iulia, preserves the arc of that entire history within a single set of walls. The Alba Carolina citadel, built between 1716 and 1738 by the Italian architect Giovanni Morando Visconti, is the largest Vauban-style star fortress in southeastern Europe. 7 bastions form a 7-pointed star. 7.5 kilometers of fortification walls surround a city within a city. But Alba Iulia's significance runs deeper than architecture. On the 1st of December 1918, with the old empires collapsing around them, 1,228 elected delegates gathered in the Union Hall. They voted unanimously for the unification of Transylvania with the Kingdom of Romania. That date, December the 1st, is Romania's national day. King Ferdinand and Queen Marie were crowned here in 1922, consecrating the creation of Greater Romania at its maximum territorial extent. In a region where every stone carries a disputed history, Alba Iulia is the place where modern Romania declared itself whole. Centuries passed. Empires rose and retreated. Goths, Huns, Gepids, Avars, and Slavs moved through the region in successive waves. Transylvania was absorbed into the Kingdom of Hungary around the turn of the first millennium. And in the middle of the 12th century, a Hungarian king made a decision that would shape this land for the next 800 years. King Geza II invited settlers from the Rhine-Moselle region, from Luxembourg and Flanders, to colonize Transylvania's southeastern frontier. They were called Saxons, though they were not from Saxony at all. They came in their hundreds, then thousands, bringing with them agricultural techniques, Gothic architecture, trade guilds, and a fierce sense of civic self-governance. In 1224, King Andrew II granted them the Andreanum, the Golden Charter, one of the oldest documents of regional self-governance in all of Europe. It guaranteed free elections, tax rights, territorial authority, and unified administration across what the Saxons called the Siebenbürgen, the 7 fortresses. Those 7 fortified towns became the spine of Saxon civilization. Bistrița, Brașov, Cluj, Meadows, Sebeș, Sibiu, Sighisoara. Each grew into something remarkable. The Saxons established Romania's first hospital, in Sibiu, in 1292. Its first pharmacy, also Sibiu, in 1494. The Brukenthal National Museum in Sibiu, which opened its doors to the public in 1817, predates the Louvre by 3 years. Johannes Honterus brought printing to Brașov. The vast majority of Saxons embraced Lutheranism in the 1530s, making Transylvania one of the earliest Protestant strongholds in Eastern Europe. For centuries, these communities thrived. Their population peaked at around 300,000 in the 1930s. They built guilds, schools, churches, and walls. And they built something else, something that has no parallel anywhere on Earth: fortified churches. Between the 13th and 16th centuries, Saxon communities across Transylvania transformed their village churches into defensive complexes, surrounding them with concentric walls, watchtowers, grain stores, and escape tunnels. They were designed to shelter entire villages during invasion, and invasion came often. the Mongols in 1241, the Ottomans in the centuries that followed, raiders from every direction. At their peak, more than 300 villages had fortified churches. Today, 150 are well preserved. 7 have been inscribed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. It is the highest concentration of fortified churches anywhere in the world. Bison, built between 1486 and 1524, rises on a hilltop behind triple concentric walls reaching 35 feet high, reinforced by 9 gate towers. Its sacristy door, a single oak slab, conceals a 19-point deadbolt locking mechanism so intricate that it won a prize at the Paris World Exhibition in 1898. And inside the church, a small room was set aside for a singular purpose: the matrimonial prison. Couples seeking divorce were confined together for 2 weeks, sharing one bed, one plate, one spoon. In 300 years of this practice, only one couple actually divorced. Further east, Primeval is the largest fortified church in southeastern Europe. Founded by the Teutonic Knights beginning in 1212, it is built on a Greek cross plan, surrounded by an oval enclosure wall 3 to 4 meters thick, the thickest of any fortified church. Inside those walls, 272 rooms rise across 4 stories, each assigned to a village family for storing provisions and sheltering during attack. The complex could hold 1,600 villagers, and it included a horse-powered mill and bakery. The village of Primeval was destroyed more than 50 times between the 13th and 17th centuries. The church itself was rarely captured. It was the Saxons who built the cities that now define Transylvania. Sibiu, their largest and wealthiest citadel, served as the capital of Transylvania at various points across its history. It was named the European Capital of Culture in 2007, a recognition that surprised many who had never heard of it, but not those who had walked its cobblestone streets. Today, it is known as the Town with Eyes for the distinctive dormer windows called Ochi Sibiului that peer down from every rooftop like the lids of 100 watching faces. Some say the windows are charming, others find them unsettling. Town watches you either way. The Liar's Bridge. Romania's oldest cast-iron bridge, built in 1859, carries a legend. It collapses if you tell a lie while standing on it. It still stands. Whether that says more about the bridge or the honesty of those who cross it remains a matter of local debate. The Astra Open-Air Ethnographic Museum sprawls across 96 hectares on the outskirts of the city, with over 300 relocated structures, farmhouses, workshops, churches, watermills, gathered from villages across Romania. It is the largest open-air museum in Europe, a civilization reassembled in one place. Brașov sits at the foot of Tampa Mountain, which rises 960 meters directly above the old town. At its center stands the Black Church, the largest Gothic church between Vienna and Istanbul, 89 meters long, a bell tower of 65 meters, capacity for 5,000 worshippers. It was built across nearly a 7th century, from 1383 to 1477, and its darkened walls, long attributed to the Great Fire of 1689, though more recent research points to 19th century industrial pollution, gave the church its name. It was never intended to be black. Time made it so. Inside, 119 Anatolian carpets hang from balcony railings and walls, the largest collection outside Turkey, donated by Saxon merchants between the 15th and 17th centuries as tokens of gratitude for safe passage along the trade routes. A 4,000-pipe Buchholz organ, built in 1839, remains the largest mechanical organ in Romania. Services are still held in German and Romanian. 8 centuries of worship, continuing in a church that was never meant to carry the color of its name. Nearby, Rope Street, Stratus Forii, measures just 1.32 meters wide and 83 meters long. One of the narrowest streets in Europe, threading between medieval walls like a whisper. And then there is Sighisoara, a citadel of ochre and amber perched on a hill above the Tarnava River. Its historic center is the only continuously inhabited medieval citadel of its kind in this part of Europe. 930 meters of fortification wall, originally 4 meters high and later raised to 14, encircle the old town. 14 defense towers once guarded the perimeter, each built and maintained by a different craft guild. The clock tower, 64 meters tall, built around 1360, still guards the main gate, its mechanical clock sending painted figurines through their daily rotation. Inside the citadel, an ochre-colored house at the edge of the main square carries a wrought iron dragon above its entrance. It is said that Vlad III, Vlad Dracula, was born here in 1431. From the square, the covered staircase, Scara Acoperita, climbs 175 wooden steps beneath a timber roof, built in the 17th century to protect schoolchildren walking uphill in winter. At the top stands the church on the hill, a 13th century Gothic structure whose crypt and faded frescoes carry the weight of centuries. The staircase creaks underfoot. Light filters through gaps in the planking. It is not a grand ascent. It is a daily one, worn smooth by generations of ordinary use. And here, the myth begins. The truth is simpler and more violent than the fiction. Vlad III was a real man, a prince of Wallachia, the territory south of the Carpathians, not Transylvania itself. His father, Vlad II, had been inducted into the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order dedicated to defending Christendom, and took the name Dracul, meaning the dragon. Dracula simply means son of the dragon. It had nothing to do with vampires or the undead. It was a family title. Vlad ruled Wallachia in 3 turbulent periods during the 15th century. He was brutal in ways that were exceptional, even by the standards of his era. He claimed in a letter to the Hungarian king to have killed 23,884 people. Outside his capital at Târgoviște, he reportedly impaled 20,000 Ottoman captives and left them in a forest of stakes so horrifying that Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, turned his army around and retreated. The nickname Țepeș, the Impaler, was given posthumously. An estimated 80,000 people died during his reign. He was killed in battle near Snagov in late 1476. His head was sent to Constantinople. In Romania, Vlad is not a monster. He is a national hero, a defender who held the Ottomans at the gates of Europe through sheer, terrifying force of will. The castle the world now calls Dracula's Castle, Bran Castle, has almost no connection to Vlad at all. It was built in 1377 by the Saxons of Brasov as a customs post and border fortification. Vlad never lived there. He probably never visited. The claim that he was imprisoned at Bran has been debunked. He was held at Visegrad Fortress in Hungary, 750 kilometers away. His actual fortress was Poenari Castle in Wallachia, reached by climbing 1,480 steps up a cliff. The Dracula's Castle label was a marketing invention of the 1960s, created during the communist era to attract Western tourists. Today, Bran Castle draws more than 800,000 visitors a year. Most come looking for vampires. What they find is a pleasant medieval fortress that served as the summer residence of Queen Marie of Romania. And the man who started all of this? Bram Stoker, the Irish author who published his novel in 1897, never visited Romania. Not once. He spent 7 or 8 years researching Transylvania from his desk in London, drawing primarily from a book by a Scottish woman named Emily Gerard, who had lived in Sibiu and Brasov in the 1880s, and a diplomatic account by William Wilkinson from 1820. His working notes, rediscovered in 1970 at the Rosenbach Museum in Philadelphia, reveal that he borrowed only the name Dracula and scattered fragments of atmosphere. There is no mention of impalement, no real research into Vlad III. The original title of the novel was The Undead. The Count was initially called Count Wampir. Stoker found the name Dracula late in the process, liked the sound of it, and attached it to his fiction. A name. That is all he took. And from it, an entire identity was overwritten. But the real Transylvania endured. And in recent decades, it has found an unlikely champion. King Charles III first visited Romania in 1998. He came back the following year, and the year after that. For more than 25 years, the British monarch returned to Transylvania almost annually, not for its castles or its fame, but for its quietness, its meadows, its survival. In the village of Viskri, a settlement of a few hundred people in the hills of southern Transylvania, Charles purchased a crumbling 18th century Saxon farmhouse for roughly 30,000 euros. There was no Wi-Fi, no television, just wooden box beds, a 17th century stove, and the sound of crickets. He restored it carefully, in keeping with the village. The property was renamed the King's House in 2022 and reopened as a museum and cultural center. More than 38,000 visitors came in its first full year. But Charles did more than visit. He chaired the Mihai Eminescu Trust for over 13 years, helping plant more than 1.5 million trees, supporting over 400 local artisans, and financing most of the 400,000 euro ecological sewage system in Viskri, Romania's first of its kind. He bought additional properties in the Zelan Valley and in the villages of Malencrav and Breb. He once explained the connection in characteristically understated terms. He is, through his great-grandmother Queen Mary, a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler. He joked that he has, in his words, a stake in the country. The fortified church at Viskri stands at the heart of the village, a structure originally built as a Szekler chapel before 1162, later rebuilt by the Saxons in the 14th century and fortified with walls reaching 7 meters high. It is among the 7 UNESCO-listed Saxon churches. But Viskri is more than a monument. It is a place where the old patterns of life, the haymaking, the horse-drawn transport, the seasonal rhythm, continue not as performance, but as practice. Charles himself described what he found here. He spoke of the timelessness. The landscape, he said, was almost out of some of those stories you used to read as a child. South of Viskri, in the city of Turda, the ground opens into something stranger still. Salina Turda is a salt mine that has been worked since before the Romans arrived. The first written record dates to 1271. Mining continued for more than 6 centuries until operations ceased in 1932. The tunnels sat empty for decades. Then, beginning in 2008, the mine was transformed into something no one expected. Today, visitors descend 112 meters into the earth. The temperature holds steady at 11 to 13 degrees, year-round. The Turda mine is a bell-shaped chamber, 90 meters high, 87 meters in diameter, with an underground lake at its base. The Rudolf mine, at 120 meters depth, contains a 20-meter Ferris wheel, the only underground Ferris wheel in the world, alongside a 180-seat amphitheater, miniature golf, and a bowling alley. More than 600,000 visitors come each year. It is the largest salt mine museum on the planet. Nearby, Salina Prade sits atop an estimated 3 billion tons of crystal salt, with an underground treatment facility at 120 meters depth where patients breathe the salt-saturated air for respiratory conditions. It has been used this way for generations. But Transylvania's most radical contribution to human history may not be its mines, or its forests, or its mountains. It may be a single document drafted in a small town in 1568, the Edict of Turda. In January of that year, the Transylvanian Diet assembled at the town of Turda, modern-day Turda, under King John Sigismund Zapolya. He was the world's only Unitarian monarch, guided by his court preacher, Ferenc David, a man who had been born Catholic, converted to Lutheran, then Calvinist, then Unitarian, each time following his own conscience deeper into uncharted theology. What emerged from that assembly was one of the first declarations of religious freedom in European history. Its key passage declared that preachers should be allowed to explain the gospel, each according to his understanding, and that no one should be reviled for his religion by anyone. It went further than anything that had come before. The 1555 Peace of Augsburg had allowed rulers to choose their realm's faith. In Transylvania, the individual could choose for themselves, regardless of the ruler's belief. 4 religions were officially recognized: Catholic, Lutheran, Calvinist, and Unitarian. This was issued while the wars of religion were devastating Western Europe, 4 years before the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre in France. Today, roughly 80 to 100,000 believers worship in 141 places across Romania. David himself was arrested for continued theological innovation after the king's death. He died in prison at Deva Castle in 1579. But the idea survived. That spirit of faith, adapting, enduring, finding form against constraint, can be seen most vividly in the far north, in the region of Maramures. Technically beyond the historical borders of Transylvania proper, Maramures is bound to it by mountain, language, and spirit. Here, under Habsburg rule, ethnic Romanians were forbidden from building stone Orthodox churches. It was a deliberate suppression, a way to deny permanence to a faith considered inferior by the Catholic establishment. The response was extraordinary. Local craftsmen developed what became known as the Gothic style of Maramures, a fusion of Orthodox liturgical tradition with Gothic architectural influence, executed entirely in wood. Thick logs of oak, pine, and fir were assembled using no nails, no metal, only interlocking joints and wooden pegs. The results were towering. The church at Șodești reaches 72 meters, among the tallest wooden structures in all of Europe. 8 of these churches have been inscribed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The church at Iud, built as early as 1364 by some accounts, is where the Codex of Iud was discovered in an attic. Dated to 1391, it is the oldest known document written in the Romanian language. Inside, the walls blaze with folk art interpretations of biblical scenes, painted by village artists in bold, unschooled strokes. The forbidden stone became sanctified wood, and the wood, against all expectations, has outlasted the empire that imposed the ban. The creative spirit of these communities extends beyond churches. The aia, the traditional Romanian blouse, is a garment of extraordinary intricacy, hand-stitched from natural fibers using techniques like autiță embroidery, with motifs that trace their origins to the Cucuteni culture of the 5th millennium before Christ. The spiral motif, representing eternity, has been repeated on Romanian textiles for 7,000 years. In 2022, the IA was recognized by UNESCO as an element of intangible cultural heritage. Pottery traditions flourish in communities like Corund, where Hungarian-influenced designs produce distinctive glazed work, and Horezu, whose ceramics carry their own UNESCO listing. In the Apuseni Mountains, the Târgul de Fete, the Maiden's Fair, still gathers on Mount Gaina each July, a festival whose origins as a matchmaking event stretch back beyond reliable record. Transylvania does not keep its traditions in glass cases. It wears them, fires them, dances them into being, year after year, with the quiet stubbornness of people who see no reason to stop. In the eastern reaches of Transylvania, the mountains fold into something different. The land here belongs to the Szekleres, a distinct Hungarian-speaking community whose origins remain debated. Some theories link them to the Huns, others to the Avars, still others to early Hungarian frontier groups. What is certain is that by the 12th century, they were established as border guards for the Hungarian kingdom, receiving tax exemptions and self-governing rights in exchange for military service. In Harghita County today, 82% of the population identifies as ethnic Hungarian. In neighboring Covasna, 68%. These are not minorities in the statistical sense. These are majority communities living within a Romanian state, a legacy of the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, which transferred Transylvania from Hungary to Romania and left 3 million ethnic Hungarians outside their nation's borders. In Hungary, the 4th of June remains a day of national mourning. The county seat of Harghita is Miercurea-Ciuc, Szekler in Hungarian, where 82% of residents speak Hungarian as their first language. It is known for its craft beer and for a legal battle that became a national cause, when a local brewery, Sighisoara, faced off against Heineken over naming rights in 2014. But the town's deeper fame lies outside the city, at a Franciscan monastery founded in 1442. Every year, on the Saturday before Pentecost, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims walk to the shrine at Szekler, for what has become the largest Catholic gathering in all of Eastern Europe. They come from across the Hungarian-speaking world, from Romania, from Hungary, from diaspora communities as far away as Canada and Australia. It is not a spectacle. It is a homecoming. The Szekler identity is carved, quite literally, into their landscape. Szekler gates are monumental wooden structures, sometimes 4 meters tall, built of oak or pine, that mark the entrance to each household. 3 pillars support a massive girder beam, often topped by a dovecote, a pigeon loft symbolizing peace. Into the wood, artisans carve a symbolic vocabulary passed down across centuries. The sun representing God, the tree of life, tulips, roses, pomegranate, and inscriptions in an ancient runic alphabet called Rovasiras. Family history is carved into the gateposts. Each generation adds its own chapter. The oldest surviving gate dates to 1673. The town of Odoheu Secuiesc, called Székelyudvarhely in Hungarian, is considered the unofficial capital of Szeklerland. 87% of its residents are ethnic Hungarian. It is statistically the most Hungarian town in Romania. Here, the street signs are bilingual. The church services mix languages. The coexistence is not always seamless. Tensions occasionally surface around symbolic and political questions. But the daily rhythm of life is one of quiet, practiced negotiation between identities. West of the Szekler lands, the city of Cluj-Napoca announces a different Transylvania. With a population approaching 300,000 and a metropolitan area exceeding 400,000, Cluj is the unofficial capital of the entire region. It is home to Babeș-Bolyai University, founded in 1581, Romania's largest university, teaching in Romanian, Hungarian, and German simultaneously. More than 1,300 technology companies operate here, employing over 20,000 developers. The city has been called Romania's Silicon Valley. Each year, the Untold Festival draws more than 400,000 attendees. The Transylvania International Film Festival has earned international accreditation. And the 14th century Gothic Church of St. Michael, with its 76-meter tower, the tallest in Transylvania, still anchors the main square. Cluj is modern, fast, and young. But even here, the older layers remain. The statue of Matthias Corvinus, the Renaissance king born in this city in 1443, still watches from the square. But to understand what Transylvania truly preserves, you must leave the cities and return to the land. In the villages that stretch between the Saxon citadels and the Szekler hills, a way of life persists that has almost no parallel in modern Europe. Horse-drawn carts with red tasseled bridles remain a common sight on Transylvanian roads, carrying hay, produce, families to market. Grass is still scythed by hand and gathered into kapitse, the small haystacks that dot every hillside like sleeping animals. The 6-month winter, mid-November to mid-May, makes hay a lifeline. Cattle survive entirely on what was stored. One researcher described the meadows as holy ground, observing that villagers would walk only in single file through the grass, unwilling to damage even a single blade. The meadows were, in her words, as though these Transylvanians were living in a world dedicated to Saint Grass. Transhumance, the seasonal movement of sheep to high mountain pastures, has been practiced in the Carpathians since at least the 14th century, with evidence of shepherding from the Dacian period, nearly 2,500 years ago. Even now, shepherds move their flocks to alpine meadows from April to October, sleeping in temporary huts, milking sheep 3 times daily, making cheese on site. Romania holds more than 10 million breeding sheep, the 3rd largest flock in the European Union, and 70% are kept by small, local breeders. Guarding the flocks through the night are Romanian Meoritic and Carpathian shepherd dogs, large, powerful guardian breeds trained to stand between their charges and the bears, wolves, and lynx that share the same mountains. This is not a quaint tradition, this is a living system of coexistence, practiced for centuries. As one observer noted, the shepherds view the predators as part of the environment and believe they have an equal right to be there. The Miorița, Romania's most famous folk ballad and perhaps its most symbolic, tells of three shepherds who meet during transhumance. A talking ewe warns the Moldavian shepherd that the other two will murder him. But instead of fleeing, he accepts his fate with mystical serenity, asking only that his sheep tell his mother he married a princess, a metaphor for death as a cosmic wedding. The philosopher Lucian Blaga coined the term Meoritic space to describe the pastoral landscape from which this story was born. It is a story of acceptance, of persistence within surrender, of a people so entwined with their land that even death becomes a form of belonging. And yet, even Transylvania has known loss. In the decades that followed the Second World War, more than 70,000 Transylvanian Saxons were deported to Soviet labor camps. Many never returned. Under Ceausescu's communist regime, a quieter form of erasure began. West Germany negotiated emigration permits for ethnic Germans, reportedly paying around 8,000 Deutsche Marks per person. Roughly 12,000 Saxons left each year through the 1970s and 80s. By 1989, the year the regime fell, approximately 95,000 remained. Then, the dam broke. In 1991 and 1992, 75,000 Saxons emigrated to Germany. 800 years of continuous civilization emptied in a matter of months. One British newspaper called it the most astonishing and least reported ethnic migration in modern Europe. Entire villages were abandoned, churches stood empty, schools closed. Today, roughly 12,000 Saxons remain in Transylvania. Most are elderly. The fortified churches they built, once the centers of thriving communities, now stand as monuments to a people who are almost gone. Almost, but not entirely. In 2014, an ethnic Saxon from the city of Sibiu was elected president of Romania. Klaus Iohannis, soft-spoken, meticulous, a former physics teacher, served 2 terms through 2024. A Saxon leading a nation of 20 million Romanians, a remnant still standing. The Saxons were not the only ones who nearly erased Transylvania. In March of 1988, Ceausescu's government enacted what it called the systematization program. The plan was staggering in scope. Half of Romania's 13,000 villages would be razed. Their populations would be relocated to concrete agro-industrial centers. The ancient pattern of scattered hamlets, of church towers visible across the valley, of gardens and orcharding and meadows tended by individual families. All of it would be bulldozed in the name of efficiency and ideological control. The international response was fierce. 50,000 marched in Budapest. Belgium launched Opération Village Roumain, with 231 Belgian municipalities, each formally adopting a threatened Romanian village. The pressure mounted, and in December of 1989, the revolution that began in Timișoara swept the regime away. Only 23 of the planned agro-industrial towns had been completed. The plan's failure, the poverty and isolation that prevented its full execution, turned out to be a paradox of extraordinary consequence. The very forces that kept Transylvania undeveloped also kept it alive. But the threats did not end with communism. Romania's forests, the irreplaceable primeval woodlands that shelter two-thirds of the European Union's remaining old-growth trees, face a crisis that continues to this day. Conservation groups estimate that half of all timber logged in Romania is illegal. Between 2001 and 2017, 317,000 hectares of forest were lost. Approximately 62,000 hectares disappear each year, roughly 3 hectares every hour. The human cost has been devastating. 6 forest rangers have been murdered for attempting to stop illegal logging. More than 650 violent attacks against rangers have been recorded. An estimated $5.7 billion in timber value has been lost since the fall of communism. The chainsaws do not discriminate between managed woodland and ancient, untouched forest. Some of the trees being felled are 300, 400, 500 years old. Europe's last great primeval forest is being cut down, not by armies, not by ideology, by greed. And it is happening now. Which brings us to the question at the center of everything. What is Transylvania really? It is not the land of vampires, that much is clear. A fiction invented by a man in London, attached to a figure who ruled a different territory, set in a castle that has no genuine connection to either. A costume placed upon a place that never wore it, but stripped the costume away. And what remains is something the rest of Europe has spent the last century destroying. Transylvania is a living record of what the continent once looked like, not as a museum, not as a theme park, but as a functioning landscape where the old ways persist, not because anyone chose to preserve them, but because the conditions of history, geography, and poverty conspired to make change impossible. The agriculture here remains as it was in the 1920s and 30s. Mechanized farming never fully replaced hand methods because the terrain was too steep, the landholdings too narrow, averaging just 13 hectares per family. And the reseeding of steep slopes was simply impossible. Many villages still practice subsistence agriculture. 1 or 2 family cows, chickens, pigs, kitchen gardens, homemade suica, plum brandy, offered to every guest who arrives. The meadows are mown by hand because no machine can work the angles. The hay is stacked because no barn is large enough to hold 6 months' feed. The sheep are guarded by dogs because the wolves are real. And the forests that hold 2/3 of the European Union's remaining primeval woodland. They survived because no one could afford to build the roads that would have brought the logging trucks. Poverty was not the intent, but preservation was the result. Consider what this means. In a single region, roughly the size of Iceland, you can find more large carnivores than in all of Western Europe combined. More virgin forest than any other EU country outside the far north. More fortified churches than anywhere on Earth. One of the earliest declarations of religious freedom in European history. The longest-running Unitarian denomination in the world. Wooden churches that reach 70 meters without a single nail. A folk ballad that transforms death into a wedding. Communities where ethnic Romanians, Hungarians, Saxons, and Roma have coexisted. Imperfectly, sometimes painfully, but continuously for the better part of a millennium. One of those communities produced a president. Another produced a king's favorite refuge. Another produced a legal tradition that influenced religious liberty across 2 continents. The salt beneath its towns has been mined since before Rome existed. The bison that once vanished are now choosing their own paths through its valleys. And the shepherds still walk single file through the meadows, honoring the grass. There is no other place like this in Europe, not because it was protected, because it was forgotten. In 1933, an 18-year-old Englishman set out to walk from the Hook of Holland to Constantinople. His name was Patrick Lee Fermer. When he reached Transylvania, he found a world that stopped him in his tracks. Remote castles, mountain villages, monasteries, and towering ranges that are the haunt of bears, wolves, and eagles. He described it with a tenderness that bordered on disbelief, the settled beauty of a landscape that seemed both ancient and impossibly present. He wrote of fields scattered with poppies, of golden green waves of cornfields fading into mountain shadow, of a red sun tipping below the horizon as an orange moon rose on the other side, as if the sky were a set of scales in perfect balance. He published the account decades later. The critic Jan Morris called it an amazingly complex and subtle evocation of a place that is no more, and praised Fermor as the greatest of living travel writers. But Fermor was wrong about one thing. The place is still there. The meadows he described still shimmer in summer. The bears still move through the same forests. The shepherds still follow the same paths. The fortified churches still crown the same hilltops, even if the people who built them are nearly gone. The covered staircase in Sighisoara still creaks under the weight of children walking to school. And in the evening, across 100 villages, the sound of cowbells still drifts through the valley as the herds come home. King Charles, speaking of Transylvania, once said that it represents the last corner of Europe where you can see true sustainability and complete resilience and the maintenance of entire ecosystems for the benefit of mankind. He called it incomparable. He returned year after year, not to a country, but to an idea. The idea that a human landscape could remain in balance with the natural world around it. That it was possible to live lightly enough that the meadows kept their 50 species per square yard, the wolves kept their territory, and the forests kept their silence. He found in Transylvania what he could not find at home, and yet the balance is not guaranteed. European Union agricultural subsidies now favor large-scale farming over the small holdings that preserved the meadows. Food safety regulations designed for industrial producers threaten traditional methods of cheese-making and curing. Young people leave for Bucharest, for Berlin, for London, drawn by salaries that the land cannot match. The ancient pattern of 3 generations under one roof, of grandparents teaching children to read the seasons, is thinning year by year. Abandoned meadows revert to scrub within 3 to 5 years. The biodiversity they held does not return. The illegal logging continues. The bears, increasingly pushed from their habitat by forest loss and expanding human settlement, are coming into conflict with communities more often. 26 people have been killed and 274 seriously injured by bears over the past 2 decades. In 2023 alone, there were 7,500 emergency calls related to bear encounters. Controversial culling quotas have been authorized. 481 bears approved for removal in 2024. The wolves that survived communist-era bounties, the forests that survived communist-era isolation, the meadows that survived industrial-era pressure. All of them face a new century of threats, different in nature, no less real in consequence. But the land endures, for now. The haystacks still appear each summer, built by hands that have followed the same rhythm for generations. The sheep still climb to the high meadows in April and descend in October. The fortified churches still stand, silent, patient, watching over valleys that have barely changed since the Saxons first raised their walls. The bison, once extinct here, now number over 200 and are choosing their own migration routes. The Edict of Turda, written 4.5 centuries ago in a world of religious bloodshed, still echoes in the Unitarian parishes of eastern Transylvania. And somewhere in the Fagarash Mountains, in a beech forest that has never seen an axe, the canopy closes overhead, and the silence holds. The world came to Transylvania looking for a monster. What it should have been looking for was a mirror, a reflection of everything Europe once was, and chose to give away. The forests, the meadows, the coexistence between human and wild, the small-scale lives that produced enormous resilience, the faith that difference need not mean division. The real Transylvania does not need a vampire. It has something far rarer, a living landscape that the rest of the continent destroyed and can never get back. If journeys like this one matter to you, consider subscribing to the channel. Every documentary we make is an attempt to look past the surface, past the myths and the headlines, and find the place that actually exists. Share this with someone who still thinks Transylvania is about Dracula. They deserve to know what's really there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next road.